Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimists, where we talk about all things film with a healthy dose of optimism. I'm your co host, Seth Boyd,
I am Megan Tierney.
and today we're talking about a director we've talking about a few times. Certainly one of the most prolific and acclaimed directors of our time,
Mm,
and one of the most profitable, Christopher
yes.
Nolan. We're going to be talking specifically about his second film, Memento.
Mm,
Megan, I know you hadn't seen this before prior to the podcast, but before we dive into Memento,
mhm.
what films have you seen? What do you think about Nolan? Do you have a take
Sure.
or an understanding of him and how he fits into cinema today?
Sure. And I think my understanding of him is reflective of like my timeline growing up to
Mm.
as like a late or late early 2000s kid
Right.
that I am, where I think we basically associated Nolan with a lot of large big budget and also like very successful and specifically like monetarily successful, I would say, like
Hmm.
Hollywood movies, big Hollywood movies. So with the big one being like Inception, which I have seen. Interstellar was,
Right.
I think, actually a little better version of Inception almost,
I
or like
agree.
a
Actually,
more
I
of a
think,
favorite. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it also like it's indicative of the time too. Like I feel like Interstellar came out when movies like Gravity were doing so well. So
Mm.
I think now we're kind of seeing that, or I had the maybe false or just judgmental impression of Nolan movies that they kind of glob onto maybe cash grabs, maybe like just
Mm.
like
Fair.
the general zeitgeist kind of thing. But I'm happy to so happy to that you have brought Memento into my life because it I think it really shows. I was just really impressed. Like first of all, I'll say that right off the bat, and like it shows the competency of
Hmm.
his directorial style that I think like can't literally just can't be denied. And a movie like Memento is the way to like showcase it almost at like its finest, I guess.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's what I felt going into it, and I like the good kick in the pants that I need to change my mindset about these things. And it was great. So I'm really excited
Well,
to talk
great.
to you about it. Yeah.
I'm excited to hear talk about it with you, and I'm very happy to hear that. And I had a similar thing. I remember because yeah, he certainly has had some of the biggest blockbusters
That's it.
that were good. We've trashed other directors. This wasn't a Michael Bay Transformers 3 movie that's making nearly $1 billion. It's like he very much revitalized superhero movies for better or for worse. I do think there's a
Yeah.
case that we wouldn't have Marvel if his Dark Knight trilogy wasn't so financially successful,
Sure.
which I will say I think those are his weakest films. They're pretty fun. um, but I think what I really remembered about, I remember seeing Batman Begins, probably the first movie a lot of people our generation saw of his, Megan. And I remember seeing a trailer for The Prestige after that, and it had from Christopher Nolan, the director behind Batman Begins. And that was the first time as a film goer I had seen a selling point as this was the creative mind behind a movie. This was the director,
Yeah.
not
Hmm.
starring Christian Bale or not starring, bigger actors.
Yes.
So he was kind of became a household name in that kind of hitchhiking way. It would be Christopher Nolan's whatever, Christopher Nolan's
Mm,
Inception.
that's a
Um,
great point.
and I think because his movies were clearly Nolan movies, and
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
always, with one exception, has been heavily involved in the screenplay, as credited as either a screenwriter or a co-screenwriter. So he's very much that auteur of like a Nolan movie's a Nolan movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and that was exciting to have a new name like that. And then we were talking
True.
about those names, and obviously other directors were doing that. I think I was 15 or something when Batman Begins came out.
Yeah,
So it was a thing I noticed, at that
that's
age.
true.
Not that it
Hmm.
wasn't being done before then, but um, you really touched on what I wanted. One of the reasons I wanted to rewatch this movie, I wanted to have your take though, because yeah, he has done so many big expensive movies. He has a movie coming out this year, Oppenheimer, which I'm excited about. We might talk about later. But what
Oh,
got me
yes.
thinking about this was there was a headline I saw that was celebrating the fact that this was that Oppenheimer was the smallest budget Nolan had in quite a while, and that small budget
Oh.
was $100 million. And
Oh my god,
um,
I laugh
right, and
audibly.
I don't know if that's a, I mean, that's a better, and I had to crunch the numbers, and we don't need to get into the numbers, but
Jesus.
that is half
Yeah.
the budget of Tenet, you know. Um,
Wow.
and honestly, like the one before that was $100 million was Dunkirk, which was the
Yeah.
movie before Tenet. So it's not that crazy of news, you know. And we'll talk more about his
Wow.
other movies, I think, throughout the episode. But I got me thinking, like, do I have a false viewing of Memento because it was one of the first movies I watched when I was first really getting into movies. It was one of those direct.
Yeah,
I found a new auteur and I'm going back into it. And this was this very indie, low budget, really cool movie
sure.
that I think showcases his talents more than the special effects. And his special effects are often very cool practical effects, but I thought Memento was so much cooler just from a storytelling standpoint and what he accomplished than his other movies. So I
Mm.
needed to check in with you, Megan. Am I
Mm.
wrong? Am I right? Was it
Oh,
nostalgia, or how does it stack up to? We'll get into what the movie is, but we're
sure.
kind of spoiling our take on it from the get-go.
Well, and especially because, like, I mean, I said, like, I was impressed, and I think that's the best word to use for it. I think that, like, it's important to me that this film is his, I thought it was his first, it's his second, you said, like his
His first
second.
movie was called Following. It was made for $6,000.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So an English movie that's also very good and very cool. It's not this impressive.
Hmm.
Just there's no names in there whatsoever. Just
Hmm.
him and his friends are the actors in it, or not him, but his friends. Yeah.
Which is cool too. Or that's
Yes.
like, I feel like that's like an honest way to come into filmmaking at
Sure.
least. So, and
Yeah.
then also that this is a more, this is a very competent film, like
Yeah.
extremely, and like quite a triumph really, like that I'm
Hmm.
excited to talk about with you. And I think that I care about like directors if they have a long list of films. Like I kind of care about those earlier stuff. I think it
Yeah.
helps to see like what was their passion early on and like what they thought was worth telling right off the get-go for their, and I feel like especially with such an accomplished director, they would have the will to put something out there, like with their name on it kind of thing.
Right.
I assume that that's like a lot of directors wants, and so I kind of went into it with that mindset too, and I was like, wow, if this is like what was on his mind, like that is pretty impressive to me, especially as we've
Yeah.
tried to make films ourselves, me and you said. Like
Yes.
so I like that, like I'm really interested in stuff like that too, so I was wrong. I felt like I was wrong. Hmm.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Not that the goal was to prove you wrong. I
No.
I don't think you and I had actually talked in depth about what we actually thought about Nolan. We just had referenced him before. So,
Well, and I
but
think it's like he's one of those directors, I mean,
yeah,
if
he is.
you have a film podcast, you're going to talk about a Nolan,
He's gonna
like
come up. Yeah,
he's going to come up. Yeah. Hmm.
absolutely. And I still very much like his movies, and there being a new Nolan movie is still exciting to me. But
Yeah.
it's kind of like other people pointed out, like some of the early Spielberg movies, even before Jaws, are really different types of movies. He has some kind of crime thrillers on their runs
Mm.
and exciting things. And it's like there's a little bit that's kind of hard to ignore. Like, what if he just did this? Because this is Nolan pre sci-fi. This is Nolan
Right.
pre comic book, and I like his sci-fi stuff. But there
Hmm.
is and I think we should also note, like, this movie came out 2000, so we're fresh off of a really good run of American indie movies being crime
Hmm.
movies, and this was, it's British, but this was made in America. This is effectively an American film in terms of funding
Yeah.
and everything, shot in Pasadena. So it's like this was like the tail end of a really, really good time for indie crime American movies,
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
like that's how Tarantino and Coen Brothers and even Steven Soderbergh got their start.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, it's kind of also like a type of movie that doesn't get made that much anymore.
Hmm.
But
I agree.
without going into it too much, let's describe what the hell it is. Because
How difficult task.
it's a difficult task. So it is a crime thriller. It's a neo-noir, and I think that's
Okay.
important. Guy Pearce plays Leonard Shelby, who is a man with short-term memory loss. He
Hmm.
cannot create new memories, and it's very odd that the only two movies I know of that are about this are this and the Adam Sandler movie, 51st Dates.
True.
Which apparently this movie has been cited as being medically accurate, or at least more medically accurate than one would expect.
Yeah.
So he is looking for the man who he knows only as John G, who raped and murdered his wife and assaulted him, resulting in this brain injury. That's the main premise. We have, which I also right off the get go, does one of the things I really like when a neo-noir does, or a noir in general, which is it's not necessarily a traditional detective. He was an insurance investigator who's out for her revenge. It's not a cop, it's not a private detective.
Amateur detective.
It is, exactly.
Yeah.
It's an amateur. It's someone who's in over their head.
Yeah,
And
it's a thrown in it kind of
yeah,
mentality,
exactly.
or needing to detect and to avenge. There's a lot of
Yeah.
like revenge going on in it too.
There is, absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
But the most notable thing we should address of this movie is that it is primarily told backwards.
Yeah.
So, and there's two timelines. So there's scenes in color and there's scenes in black and white, and it's not clear at
Mhm.
first. The scenes in black and white are moving forward, and the scenes in color are moving back. And I don't think you even really fully understand how closely related those are until you've seen it multiple times.
Yes.
So a standard scene in color will end, and then the next scene will pick up and end where that previous scene just started. So you keep
Right.
going back and forth like this until you get to the beginning of the movie. And it's a really great, interesting way to tell a story. And it sounds gimmicky, but it's
Mhm.
also, I just think, frankly, really cool. I think it's really interesting, and it's a very, like you said, it's very innovative. And this
Yeah.
clever trick to me is more fun to look at than the hallway scene in Inception or something.
Yes.
This is, what do you think of that, Megan, though? What are your thoughts?
I agree. So, I mean, it's the most notable, I would say, like editing tactic used throughout it, because it is throughout this whole thing, it is told
Yeah.
backwards. And in the first moment, I was interested in how they would like repeat scenes
Hmm.
often. Like it's not like I think I've seen some narratives where it flow, or backwards narratives, or like chronologically reversed narratives that kind of flow, they just kind of flow and throw you along for the ride almost.
Right.
But I think this one is done so specifically to show like his feelings, I guess. And like it really creates a feeling of being in this guy's head almost. I think that's the biggest thing I got from it.
Yeah.
And I, in that first, like I said, I was talking about like the where it would re-show little bits of a scene. And at first I was like, okay, maybe that's a little, I almost thought it was like, could be perceived as like being a little lazy, or just like trying to tie up the ends kind of
Sure.
quickly. But then I was like, throughout the whole thing, and that was like the first couple times that it happened. But then I thought, you know what, like I think this is the best, I honestly think it may be the best way to show this guy's like progression throughout the whole thing.
Right.
And it's not just that the director plays also with like with that aspect too, because things can twist from the previous scene that we've seen, and that's where it got like really really interesting for me and became a very obviously good tactic. So that was what really got me too. And then sorry, quickly too, is that
Of
like
course.
I think that it just keeps you along for the ride really well. That was the biggest thing that I was mostly impressed by, because I think it could sound a little like exhausting almost, because
Right.
it's literally this whole time. But I was really impressed with like that wasn't the case for my viewing experience. So I was pleasantly surprised.
I really agree. I think that's such a great point, because like that is a really great way to put us in the same mindset as the character, because we can usually, from almost the same context clues that Leonard has, figured out what's happening in this immediate scene, but we often don't guess correctly in the same way that he doesn't, and we don't know what happened right before it. So
Yeah.
there's one of the best examples of this is there's a scene where his memory starts with he is running. He says, okay, what am I doing? I'm running. I
Yeah.
guess I'm chasing this guy. And then that guy is surprised and points his gun at him and shoots, like, oh no, I'm being chased by this guy.
Right.
It's like I am not the one in control here. And there's a lot of, in a great noir way, to some dark humor like this. But
That's right.
Sixth Sense, which is happens a lot. I think it's pretty funny. But yeah, I think you do really get his sense of complete disorientation
Yeah.
that he
Mm-hmm.
has. One question I have for you, because it's really hard for
Mm-hmm.
me to gauge these things, having seen this movie quite a few times. Do you think it's possible to guess the ending or any elements of the story? Did you have any inklings of the way it was going to go? We
I
can get into
think,
what the story more is in a moment here, but
yeah. Well, they set it up nicely. I think that they also add in some psychological elements that
mhm,
through more towards like the latter third or so, where
yeah,
we really see his character kind of the plot lines, if you will, like start to kind of crumble in on each other, and that's
right,
where I think it actually really gets interesting. I think the pacing of it is really well done as well because it's pretty straight for the first two acts for me almost, and then
yeah,
like there are turns like throughout it too, like with those plot devices and stuff, and that's where it gets like really interesting to me. So I was kind of guessing towards when the psychological aspects and he's kind of deteriorating a little bit. I was like leaning towards that he is the killer ultimately
mhm,
of his wife, because
okay,
it started to like sort of make sense in that way.
yeah.
But it still takes you on a ride. It still takes you on a
You're
ride.
not far off that he is a killer, and he has,
Yeah.
it's. I'll try to summarize the plot here real quick, because, like we said, that's the premise is he's looking for the guy who killed his
Yeah.
wife, and so we begin with him murdering somebody he knows as
Right.
Teddy. We don't really know why Teddy's stopping him, and he's saying like, "I found you. You're the guy." And then we see Teddy a lot in the going backwards scenes. They seem to be
Yeah.
friends. They seem to have some relationship, and it ultimately comes out that Teddy was the cop who
Mhm.
was assigned to the case who believed Leonard's story. That Leonard's story was that there was a second person, because they were able to find there was two assaulters, and
Yeah.
one was, I believe, killed on the site. And no one believed that there was this other guy that Leonard
Hmm.
was saying, and he's the only one who saw him. He has brain damage, so he basically has been going around for, it seems like, maybe years with
Maybe.
Leonard, helping him find different John G's. They found the original guy, they killed him,
Hmm.
and Leonard did not remember it. And he's been sore that he would remember it. He's just assumed
Oh.
it'll be so significant that he'll make a note of it. And that didn't work. And Teddy's, who's a great actor, Joe Pantanilio, who is
Hmm.
probably most famous for The Matrix and Sopranos, who's great in this, great sleazy detective
Yeah.
noir guy, makes the comments like, "How many John G's do you think we've killed?" you know,
Oh.
and it gets to the point
Yes.
where he is kind of framing local drug dealers to arrange them to bring a lot of cash for a fake drug deal so that he can get Guy Pearce's Leonard to kill them, and he gets the money knowing
Yes.
Leonard's not going to remember this. So there's a very sad, everybody is using
That's right.
him, his willingness to kill is like a memory. So
Right.
it's very, very dark. And in a moment of realization, Leonard becomes aware of this and decides he's going to get revenge by telling himself via his notes. He's always taking Polaroids with people
Yes.
that John G is the guy, or he writes down his license plate number, and he's going to get a
Hmm.
tattoo saying this is the thing.
Right.
So he sets himself up to have one more adventure, which is killing the guy
Hmm.
who betrayed him. And it's great that it's at the ending. It's this really
Yeah.
brutal, in case there's any doubt that our protagonist wasn't a good person. We have him completely desperate, just deciding to murder somebody for pure revenge. It was,
Yep.
for me, very jarring upon the first viewing.
Yeah, for sure.
Certainly plays into the genre, but
Yeah. Hmm.
um, aside from previously discussed, what are some of your other favorite elements of this movie, or roles, or whoever stood out to you?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the note taking too element because I think that that was it's really like almost a character in of itself, or like it's such a big plot device to
Hmm.
move things along that, and I think it's a great way to again like really get into this guy's head a lot. Like I just was feeling like more it's almost like more maddening as it went along because
Yeah.
you get confined to literally your whole like life via these like notes and stuff, and
Mm.
it became it was fun for me to like take stock of what is in the scene specifically that we're seeing, or like what and then to like think about it in the plot, like what is in his life at the moment that would be significant. And it's really crazy to like think about your
Mhm.
life in that way. And that was
Yeah,
what was like really getting me along for the ride too, was like taking stock of your, or literally needing to take stock of like important things in your life.
right.
And the devices and like ways that they do it via tattoos all over his body about things, like
Mhm.
backwards tattoos across his chest. It's just very like interesting, and you wonder why they go for some routes versus other things, and
Sure.
that was really fun too.
Yeah, this is a very paranoid movie, and you have a
Yeah.
lot of those scenes of him narrating, doing classic noir narration, and yeah,
Yep.
leaving these notes. And then the most of the black and white scenes are him on the phone,
That's right.
and you don't know who he's talking to. And that's actually maybe the scariest part in the movie, especially the first time I
Hmm.
saw it, where he's on the phone and we've never heard who he's talking to, and he's removing bandages from a recent tattoo, and it says never answer the phone. He says,
That's
"Wait, who
right.
are you?" And that person hangs up.
Yes.
And
That was great.
that was great. That was so wonderful. And it is kind of, you know, with us talking about these moments, I hope Nolan does do more of a straight up like psychological thriller or a horror
Yeah.
thing. So, because this is kind of a psychological thriller,
Right. Right.
but doing some little even more lean into that would be great. But
I know.
I thought Carrie Ann Moss was great in this too as the femme fatale. Um,
Yes. And
uh,
she has a twist of her own too, like with one of the
yeah,
scenes, which was that was like where I thought it was really picking up too. Like I think her character had a lot of momentum in like
yeah,
getting the psychological aspects going, kind of.
yeah. Please expand.
It was it was quite a watch trying to like
Yeah,
remember everything that
that's
happened.
fair.
But she basically in a scene manipulates him. So she is like she's his well, she portrays herself as like his friend. I think she says like
Yeah,
we're best friends kind of thing. But
yeah.
she's plotting him against her
So the drug
drug
dealer
dealer
they
boyfriend.
killed at the not the beginning of the movie as a viewer, but the beginning story wise, the
Yes.
guy that Teddy has him killed to take the cash, that was her boyfriend.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so he forgets that, he puts on this guy's clothes because he's,
Right.
I think, kind of a dominant thing of putting your clothes, and just finds in his pocket, Freddie's bar, meet me there, and just goes and forgets what he's doing. And then it's the guy he's just killed's girlfriend who was like, "What are you
Yes.
doing showing up in my boyfriend's car and wearing his clothes with this in his pocket?" And basically that other guy, Dodd, it was another person in on this deal, who's now like, "Well, where's the money?" So she does use him to scare off the
Yes.
guy who is actually after her. But so yeah, she's a very interesting character because she seems to be aware that
Yeah.
he's probably killed her boyfriend, or at least
Yeah.
is
No, that's
involved with it.
true.
She uses him. She has sex with him,
Yes.
and she's
Love
very,
story.
and part of using him is getting Guy Pearce to hit her so that she can say the other guy did this, and that's a
That
very
was
intense scene.
yes.
And I think I'd only
Well,
seen. Go ahead, please. Sorry.
just they in that one they like it's almost like she waits in her because one
Hmm.
scene starts where she like bursts through the door with her face beaten up, but it's as if she waited in her driveway, didn't go anywhere, and then came back
Yeah.
in knowing that he's gonna forget. So that was like wow.
Right. It's a very calculated. She's a really great,
Yes.
very cunning. I wouldn't say evil, but like wow, she's willing to go some places.
That's what I
This is a messed
thought.
up character who I think is really fascinating and fun to watch. And
Yeah.
I think when I first saw this, I had only other thing I'd seen her in was Matrix, and I can't remember who got the role in this first, her or Joe Pantanello, but the other one recommended
Oh,
uh
that's nice.
the other for to know them having recently worked together in the Matrix. But I
Nice.
don't remember her having as much to do in the Matrix. Like I don't remember her
Yeah.
character really standing out. And so I was really blown away seeing this movie where she has this range where she's being funny, she's being gross and terrifying and sexy, and is
Yes.
just doing all these things I didn't think her capable of being,
Yeah.
a silly viewer. So
Sure.
I thought
Yeah.
she's really fantastic in this.
I think for me, Guy Pearce is he
Hmm.
kind of at first plays it almost like a straight man. Like I feel
Yeah.
like it was until like the psychological aspects happened like towards the end, like I said. But for me, that really worked. Like it was almost like comically straight because he'd have to
Right.
explain his disease or whatever like over and over again to people. And I just, oh God, like I just thought like I could never imagine like living that just like having
Oh
to
my
explain
God.
yourself like
Right.
that like gave me secondhand anxiety. So I was like putting myself in this guy's shoes was
Yeah.
really interesting. But that he was just so like, yeah, like I have the like he was very like nonchalant about it.
Right.
For basically every person that he sees, unless they like frighten him or something or he's startled. He's
Yeah.
a little combative. But the way that he plays it and himself is really interesting. It's also kind of like I was fascinated by how he like took charge of whatever was thrown at him. Literally, like you
Hmm.
said, like one scene where we're thrown into like a gun chase, and he's like, "What am I doing? Oh, this guy's
Yeah.
chasing me." Or that was a really like kind of slapsticky, like
It
funny,
was, yeah. There's
funny
a
scene.
oddly like the time he's in the most danger is kind of slapsticky. It's
I
also
think
like
so.
he's because or right after that, he's at the guy's hotel room. He can't remember if this is his hotel room or not. He forgets and just takes a shower. Forgets he
Yes,
was there to get a drop on the guy. So then he's coming out of the shower naked, and then the guy is there, and
that's right.
forgets
Hmm.
that he's knocked a guy out and tied him up, and it's it's great, and I think the humor works in it. I don't think Nolan gets enough
I do.
credit for being funny. Um,
Yeah.
his movies have this kind of dark humor running through them all, and certainly this one, which really works for me.
It's peppered in. It really
Yeah,
reminded me of oh gosh, our one that we watched.
I have a
Uh
guess, but I don't know about you. Is it
please
Mulholland
help me out.
Drive?
Yes, it
Yeah,
reminded
like
me of the
right the
humor that was peppered through Mulholland Drive
yeah,
a little
which
bit.
I'm glad to hear you said because he's Lynch. Nolan is a big Lynch fan,
Okay.
and it's one of those things where like I don't think that's immediately clear, but some of those cuts where you have like a close up on like a piece of fiber or something.
Yes.
That's
Hmm.
very Lynch. Or you have this slapstick during a murder, or
Totally.
during I truly threat anything. That was especially those scenes in Mulholland Drive, the worst hitman just
That's right.
bumbling that up. So, and I think
Hmm.
that the Lynch one is more overtly absurd and comedic, but this is
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
I think, of that vein.
It
I should
reminded
know
me
this
of
movie came out before Mulholland Drive, but it's still Lynch had done several movies.
oh, I thought it was
Him and
like
familiar.
just directly after, but I
This was right before actually, but I mean like
right before.
that stuff is in Blue Velvet, it's in Lost Highway and
It
Wild at
reminds me a
Heart.
lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
so it's
especially
still being influenced by it. Yeah.
even that like uglier LA aesthetic
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
mundane, I should say, like LA aesthetic is it really works in this one. And again, like lots of texture, I guess that I like to say, or
Hmm.
just like close up on very minute things that they're not even used as like plot devices. It's just
Hmm.
sort of there. And I think that's like
Yeah,
it gives such a good picture of like what Guy Pearce's character like sees throughout the thing, I guess. That's how
yeah,
I took it. It kind of
I
makes it.
agree. Absolutely. Yeah, you have some great imagery like that. And on that note, I want to kind of talk about one of the other unique things about this movie was this is
Mhm.
kind of Nolan before he kind of more assembled the crew he works with now. And Wally Pfister was the cinematographer on this movie, who we worked with for quite a while until switching to Hideo Von Height, I believe his name is the cinematographer he's worked with since Interstellar, I believe. Which
Mm.
is and that guy's great, but these two guys really captured some magic together. And this movie's an example about like this movie looks so good,
Yes.
and I remember the cinematographer saying a lot of the way it looks was just figuring out how to shoot in Pasadena in daylight. They just
Yeah.
it was kind of bad. Like they just like didn't really have, except for a few exceptions, they were trained to mostly do day shoots. They didn't have parts to
Hmm.
shoot places at night. And so like
Yeah.
it's this great
That's
sun-soaked
funny.
noir.
Yeah.
But I think he really gets a lot of credit for how great this movie looks. And this movie is shot on film, and
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm sure cinematography can go into greater depth as to what specifically makes this look so good. But I think you're right. The textures are really there.
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
music is by David Julian, who I thought did a great job as
Yes.
well. And this is before Hans Zimmer being like the almost exclusive guy that no one works with for quite a while. And
Yes.
nothing against Hans Zimmer and the I have to look him up. The other
The other guy.
cinematographer,
Sorry to.
but this was kind of like a fun, more ragtag early group of people. Like Wally Pfister was famous because he worked with him. Hitio von Hutima, I don't think I'm
Wow.
pronouncing that right, but who again, and I want to clarify, is a great cinematographer. He did Spectre, did Dunkirk, Her.
Yeah.
some really cool movies, but I think this was also like Pfister's first movie or one of them. And so
Yeah.
just more indie guys who were coming up together and were able to do other movies because this movie worked. And so that's really cool.
Yes.
And I always like Guy Pearce. I think he's a great actor, and
Hmm.
it is sad to me he's one of the only leading men no one hasn't returned to.
That's
He
true.
so frequently works with the same guy. Even Oppenheimer, he's finally giving Cillian Murphy a lead role after being like a supporting character in several of his movies. So
He
I
was
still
great in this.
right. I
Hmm.
still hold out hope that one day that'll happen.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
remember reading Nolan so that everybody, when making this movie, started becoming increasingly paranoid about losing their memory, and
Oh my God.
as you would, I think,
I
to the
yeah, I
point of
didn't think
just
about
like
that,
they're
but
about to shoot and they're like, ah, shit, I can't remember where the camera was, I can't remember where this prop was, and uh,
oh,
Guy Pearce was the most on it because he was the most paranoid, but he was the one who was taking notes and remembering this is where things were,
real
and
method
kind of,
actor.
yeah, it was kind of the saving grace to
Oh my
everybody.
God.
Um,
Well, my like takeaway from it, or like if I had a one liner for it, I was like, this is a editor's movie. Like,
mhm.
uh, uh, all credit should be almost given. Well, and then I'm
Yes,
sure that that's partially to do with Nolan as well, with direction
right.
from Nolan. But like the way that this is edited is a feat. Like it is a
Yes.
triumph, and I don't know. I kind of don't know how they do it. If they must have taken like so long. I was also I was like early on, once I started to see the devices that they were using of the plot, I was
Mm,
like, I should take stock of how many scenes are repeated, or like how many just to see like how many times they had to cut that, because I
right.
was interested myself. Like it was a lot. Like it was very, very fascinating the way that they did it. It's not like distracting, like you just kind of like lose yourself in it, I felt like throughout the whole
Yeah.
thing. So and that's credit to editors everywhere. I mean, I couldn't imagine. It's so important to the plot line that the way that they
Yeah,
did this whole thing. So I'm just like, I have to
absolutely.
give props.
Props to Dottie Dorn. That's the editor.
Ooh.
Yeah, they did a great job, and that's such a great point. And especially as we get towards the end, there's a story I don't think we need to get too into that. Leonard has been telling people about Sammy Jenkins, this guy who had a similar
Yeah.
condition, and how he's kind of uh, based his way off of the way this guy couldn't live. And it comes out that like he's misremembering this story, or he's co-opted, and this guy actually
Hmm.
was a commie. He has a real condition, and there's these montages towards the end, these great quick cuts where Teddy's like, hey, that thing you said that he did, you did that. And then you have these
Yeah.
really great short cuts of that same memory being played back, but now it's him and now it's his wife. And just
Yes.
those
Yes.
really great quick shorts. And there's a blink and you miss that scene where he pictures himself in a chair at a mental asylum, and it's
Hmm.
really short. It's like the tedious stuff like that, having never actually edited film, just sounds insane to me to do and to pull off the timing
Yes.
right. I mean,
And
it's
also
difficult to do
just
with digital, but this was on film.
I agree, and just like a lot of shooting as well. Like I
Yeah.
wonder how many scenes they had to do.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's a lot, especially for a small budget. Like that should be celebrated too, because it is like
Right.
so hard, especially on film, to get multiple scenes in like
That's
on
true.
location the way that they were. So
Yeah.
it's like wow.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm so glad you like this.
Yeah.
I think we can move to kind of closing thoughts, unless you have any other like uh, bigger issues we need to say about this movie we haven't addressed.
No, I don't think so. Like it's such a good Nolan reminder, I guess, and
Yeah,
I'm glad to get the education of this movie like being his first, I guess.
yeah.
Or
I think
what
his
his
second.
earlier
Yeah,
work.
I mean, you should check
Hmm.
out Following. I think you'll like it because it's also interesting. It's because that's an even cheaper movie that I think it took like 2 years to make because they were just he and then his friends shot it on the weekends. They had their day
Yeah.
jobs. um,
Yes.
but yeah, it's very inspiring to see these earlier films, and I believe I've said already. This movie was made for $9 million, and it made
Wow.
40. And it's still acclaimed. And I think another interesting thing about the place this movie holds is like it's the same type of person who would have like a Memento poster would also have like a Fight Club and
Yeah.
The Machinist or
Sure.
American Psycho, and which can go either way. This could be someone who actually likes good movies or somebody who's wants to be Tyler Durden or something.
Likes violence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think this movie has as toxic as a following as to like some of
Mm.
those other ones. I don't know. I'm curious if you run into that, if there's been like a type of guy who's told you to watch Memento, who's also told you to watch something of that
That's
third
funny.
line. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, even like I thought of it reminded me a lot of like Mulholland Drive actually, but I feel like
Yeah,
that one is more like or even something like they're not so similar, but like Pulp Fiction has a really
sure.
big
Yeah,
following, and I feel
right,
like people
right.
that are into that are into it for the violence, the darkness and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But this one has I think that the plot device and like just the storyline in general is kind of more celebrated than like, oh, it's so dark and dingy and
Yeah,
like we hate this guy kind of or
right.
something like that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very sympathetic movie, I think, too, with
That's right.
this guy. Because yeah, everyone is constantly lying to him. Even like the
Yeah.
motel guy is just kind of fucking with him because he's like still kind of can't believe he doesn't remember, and is also renting him 2 rooms to make some
Yeah,
extra money off of them. And yeah, I get more out of it each time I see it. I think it is
sure.
rewarding for just some of these smaller interactions where you realize
Yes.
like he talks about of realizing the guy he was investigating, Sammy,
Mhm.
was smiling like he recognized them because he kind of figured out people seem to feel more comfortable if I smile like they recognize them, even if I don't recognize them.
Yes.
And I think that's a thing that people deal with regardless of having short-term memory loss. Of just like
Yeah.
it's very uncomfortable to pretend everything's
Mhm.
okay, but I'm
It
going
talked
to.
more yes, it talked more about like the humanistic side of
Yeah,
potentially having this disease than I like thought. So
right, right.
that was interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, it wasn't a joke like the Sandler movie, and it wasn't just a
Yeah.
gritty component. It was very humanistic. And one last thing about Nolan in this movie before we kind
Hmm.
of do closing thoughts on it. Nolan has been understandably accused for having the refrigerator wife trope, that is the dead wife, that
Mm.
is the driving force behind what the guy does. That's
Oh.
Inception as well. That's certainly this
Mm.
movie. That's The Prestige. And I think there's fair criticisms to just like it's not a great role for a woman to just play the wife who dies in the first 15 minutes or whatever, even less screen time in this movie. But he's
Hmm.
addressed this saying, like, yes, I do that a lot because the most terrifying thing to me is my wife dying. And so
Oh.
I'm like, that's oddly sweet. um, I guess you can be forgiven. I don't think he's done it in a couple movies, but I like that he addressed
Yeah.
it head on and had a I write what I'm
Yeah.
terrified about answer.
That's good. No, no, it's true.
Yeah.
You know, you're right to what you know, and
Hmm.
if that's him, you know,
Yeah.
so
I
be
should
it.
mention
But
his wife is his producing partner and has been for quite a while. So
oh,
they
wonderful.
she's Emma Thomas is produced most of this. I can't remember if it was this one or after this, but they've worked together quite a bit for most
Yeah,
of his
that's
career.
nice.
Yeah.
I think the goal is like, but Nolan is not the or you know, the wife dying shouldn't be the standard, I guess, for all of our
Right.
Hollywood movies coming forward. We hope to
Yeah.
see different kinds, all kinds, not
Yes.
necessarily people dying, but you know,
Yeah.
like represented in big movies that get made like that too. I think that's maybe a
Absolutely.
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We have some recommendations, but any closing thoughts on Memento?
Give it a watch. I think if you're like me, you know, if you grew up like me, knowing Inception and just kind of like associating Nolan with that, give it a watch to see. I'm always curious, like what directors' first things are and what
Hmm.
their first passions are to get some films out. And this is a big triumph for me, like, or quite a big one, like we've talked about, for the reasons we've talked about. So, give it a watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I'm glad to have rewatched this with you and
Hmm.
hear your feedback, because rewatching this, I think I was largely just dumbstruck, like, oh, this movie's just still really cool and really good.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can be
Hmm.
objective about it, but I will say, you know, ratings are hardly objective anyways, but I do think this is my favorite Nolan film still. And it is just very fun to see him do something like this again, or even something like The Prestige, which cost $40
Hmm.
million, which is still a really great movie, great actors and fun sets, and still a
Hmm.
sci-fi. I would hope he would do something like that small again.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited about Oppenheimer. Um,
Me too.
yeah,
The
let's talk
trailer
about
looked
Oppenheimer a little bit. Yeah, go
I
for it.
remember finally I got into my trailer phase again, and I go to my YouTube rabbit hole and watch like trailers coming up.
Yes. Yeah.
And that one I didn't know it was Nolan, first of all, but it was a
Mm,
striking trailer,
right.
in a style that I really like of
Mhm.
trailers, and sometimes that gives it away to the movie. It
Right.
gives me a little inkling sometimes. So Elvis was a good trailer, also, I will
Yes,
say.
that was.
I
Yeah.
thought it was a really good trailer. And it helped, set up the movie and stuff like that. But I was really excited. I thought it looked pretty stunning. I'm not like quite sure what it's about, but I'm excited to learn more. And it looks like it's up kind of up my alley in terms of
Yeah.
wanting some big historical films or something like that, So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
I wasn't familiar with the story of Dunkirk before seeing Dunkirk, but I think Dunkirk, I would also say, is like maybe his most impressive in terms of like an editing feat
Uh-huh.
after Memento, because you have those three running timelines throughout that
Yeah.
movie, and it's not too clear that they're separate timelines. You can
Mm.
get kind of lost in it. So I think that's, to me, maybe the most impressive thing he's done since. But I also don't. I hope he doesn't just do World War II movies.
Very true.
It's like I'm excited for Oppenheimer, but I hope this doesn't lead to another weird rabbit hole of that, because I'm happy for him to do anything, but I really wanted to do another small crime movie again. I'm also really excited to see Robert Downey Jr. in a non-Marvel movie. He's in that,
Yes. Mm.
and I think he's only made something like a handful, maybe like three non-Marvel movies since he's been playing,
Wow.
Iron Man. So I'm excited that he's doing a prestige director, that
Yeah.
he's doing something big like that.
Hmm.
Curious to see how that's going to go. I don't know how big of a part he has, but I'm just excited to see him not play Iron Man again, because I used to love Robert Downey Jr. And then it's like, well, there's just 20 years where you're just doing the same thing. And it got
And it's kind
tedious
of
to me.
him. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, it's
Iron Man
really hard
is
to
his
separate that.
character. Yeah,
Yeah.
or like his personality kind of. So I think that
And
becomes a problem.
it does, absolutely. And it's and especially since the first one was so fun to see him, like, oh, this is a man who's like almost dead from heroin addiction and
I
had such problems. To see
know.
him on the top of the world was exciting. And so I feel bad being mad at him, for
Yes.
surviving all that. But
No, it's
yeah,
true.
I have hopes.
I
Hold
know.
on high. Um
Nolan's previous passion was Dead Wife. Now
yeah.
moving forward, World War II? Question
Yeah,
mark?
it's
We'll see.
we'll see. All
I
right.
we'll see.
Let's hear your recommendation. And did I hear you say Interstellar is your, other than this, your favorite Nolan movie
Probably. I
that
actually
he's running
hadn't
that?
seen like so many. I
Okay.
like Inception and Interstellar. I've seen Dunkirk too, and I thought that was actually really good. I'm
Yeah.
but I think Interstellar is the most like it was really like striking to me and really
Yeah.
interesting. So I think it just kind of grabs you in that way. So probably
Well,
Interstellar in
I
that
like that
regard.
quite a bit too. And I was in a phase where I wasn't too happy to see McConaughey.
Oh really?
I still just recognized him from like rom-coms. That was kind of like, for
Yeah.
not as like he had been in Dallas Buyer Club and other thing, but I hadn't really seen any of his like he's back as an actor movies yet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he really surprised me in that one. But
Hmm.
yeah, I will just say I like Interstellar more than Inception. It's kind of between Interstellar and Prestige for me, for a non-Memento Nolan.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah, but so in terms of our recommendation, I wanted to talk about another film that did this plot device that we
Mm,
saw in Memento, which was the reverse chronological order. And actually, I needed the help of good old friend Google to give me a couple lists of like movies that did
okay.
that. Because I was like, surely I knew there was. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
that there's other films that did that, and I know that I've seen them. And I think that the reason I liked Memento a lot because I thought it was just done very effectively
Mm.
compared to other ones that I've seen. But the pick that I'm going to go for it is actually going to be 500 Days of Summer, which
Oh
I
yeah.
I like forgot myself that it went in reverse chronological order in terms of the plot line. I was trying to think of I hadn't seen it in a long time. Like
Yeah.
I'll say that right now, but I need to rewatch it. I remember very much liking it and thinking that it was very unique for the time.
Yeah.
Unique certainly for a romantic movie. It is technically considered like I've seen it considered the anti rom-com
Yeah.
because it's like a breakup story actually. It's a reverse love story in other words. If
Yeah.
you want to say it like that. But I remember really liking it. It's with Zoe Deschanel and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Their chemistry in it is really fun and I think really sincere. And when I saw it, I hadn't even like experienced love like that at the time when I saw it, certainly. But I remember being like, that's just a really, I thought it was kind of like even a poetically beautiful way to like tell a
Yeah,
breakup story, and kind of like a kinder way to do it, set aside from like what the characters actually do and the things. They're not, the most amazing kindly characters throughout the
right.
whole thing, from what I remember. But I just thought it's a nice, very like reminiscent way to talk about love that maybe didn't go the way it should have, or something like that. So I think fairly an indie budget as well. It
Yeah,
was kind of like that indie feel throughout the whole thing that I really liked at the time, and I still do now. So I recommend checking that one out.
what a great pick. I hadn't thought of that movie a little bit. I love that movie. And I just remember
I
being
did
so
too.
forward to thinking I remember a lot of people had to talk their friends and say, like, oh, it's not just a rom-com. You're going to like it, or we should go check it out.
Yeah.
But I wasn't prepared for how many level of just like jokes within the camera there were. Just like there's like that montage where he's just at every
Yep.
sad European movie. He's including Bergman. He's Chess is a
Yes.
baby that beats him and calls him a little bitch, and just like all
Yes.
these very very extreme visual jokes and like
Yeah.
film as in with camera jokes, not just lines that really surprised me. And there's like
That's right. I
like
forgot about
towards
that.
the end, there's the segment of like his expectations and what's actually happening, like those side by
Yeah.
sides. Like I hadn't seen a movie that was that aggressive, really experimental before,
Yes.
and that it's
Yes.
a romantic comedy essentially was
Right.
great.
A
But
little absurd, almost a little,
yeah, it is.
even a little like Wes Anderson-y, to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that
Hmm.
I think it's Mark Webber. I think he was playing into
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
But I think what I really love about that movie is I have had to sit a friend down and show them that movie and say you're being an idiot like this, because like
It's a
the
good
scene,
one for
right?
that.
I think it's a movie guys need to watch because especially like his friends just gathering around Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where he's just saying like, oh, things are over between me and Summers. Like, you guys aren't dating. What are you talking about? It's like, oh, she basically said she slept with somebody else. It's like, one, you're not dating. When you mean somebody else? And all she said was, I had a good weekend. Just like
Yeah.
I've had that type of conversation with guys who call me over to complain about my high school crush
Mm.
didn't respond to a text within 20 minutes.
Oh,
I'm gonna kill
beautiful.
myself, and it would just drive me insane. So it was
That's
really
good.
great to have a frame of reference. It's like it's not just me. Look at this guy.
Very
And
good.
um I like in the press tours, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and the director were very adamant about like, no, Joe's an asshole. This is a bad character. Don't be
Good.
like this
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like style wise, he was. I think it's also probably for our generation the most influential style movie.
Oh my God. Yeah.
For right,
Hmm.
like everyone I know had to get headphones like he had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Started wearing vests with ties and,
It
and
was
a hoodie.
very like quirky girl Tumblr era pick
Like
kind of
you just
thing.
walked to H&M and Urban Outfitters and got all of that stuff. And
Yes.
that was it for like
Just
10 years. So
praying that Joseph Gordon-Levitt will notice me,
yep,
please. I
absolutely.
think he's very cute. I
He's
think
very cute.
I
Yes.
he's got something about him. Something
He
about him.
does. He's a very charming guy. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh, and he
Um
was in not Inception.
he
Inception,
was
yeah.
no, he wasn't Inception.
Yeah.
He was in Inception and he was in
There's a tie-in.
Dark Knight Rises. Um
Oh, that's right. That's right. Oh my God, I forget about that.
so this always reminds me there's a great I think it was an interview for Dark Knight Rises. It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Tom Hardy are being interviewed as a panel, and the interviewer says to them, wow, what's it like for you guys being on this real big budget Christopher Nolan movie? And they kind of exchange a glance and politely say, it's not that different from the last time we were on a big budget Christopher Nolan movie, because they were both
Good.
in Inception like 3 years earlier.
Oh my God.
The interview was clearly embarrassed, but
Good.
it's a very charming
Funny.
moment.
Yes, funny.
Um, well, great selection. I'm going a different
Mhm.
direction. Um,
Ooh.
I just watched for the first time a movie I can't believe I ignored, Gone Girl, David Fincher movie from
And
2014.
I haven't seen it either.
I think you would really like it. I knew what the twist was, and I won't say what the twist was, but it's
Yes, please.
basically a marriage that seemed very perfect, had some crumbles in it, and a woman goes missing, and a lot of evidence points towards the husband did it.
Mm.
And the husband has Ben Affleck and the wife is Rosen Pike. And there's a lot of twists and turns in this, and you have some great misdirection where you have a narrator and flashback to when they were doing better from the point of view of Rosen Pike, and it comes out this is from a diary she wrote. It's a lot more twisty than I expected, even knowing some of the twists. And it's just
Yes.
like I hadn't watched a David Fincher thriller in a while. I wasn't a big fan of Mank, and so I was kind of
Mm.
like, maybe this director's lost their way. But and this movie was previous to 2014. It's like, man, he's still just so great at that. Just doing
Mm.
again,
Wow.
like talking about Memento, like doing a crime thriller. It's like he's among the best of doing that right now.
I thought it was
That's like
earlier than that for some reason than 2014, but wow,
yeah,
it's a
the
because
time
that's an
flies.
interesting year for movies, yeah,
It
like
was,
at the
yeah.
time. So that's pretty significant. Yeah.
It is based off a novel of the same name.
That's
And I thought that
amazing.
was
Yeah.
interesting too. Gillian Flynn, who wrote the novel, wrote the screenplay. So
Nice.
was obviously, heavily involved. But like, yeah, a lot of people playing against type in here. Tyler Perry is great in it as like the hotshot
Huh.
lawyer, like the fancy on TV New York City lawyer you want to get. And he was great in
Wow.
that role.
I did not
Neil,
know he was in that.
yeah, Neil Patrick Harris was great in this. And I'm not typically a fan of Ben Affleck, but he was great. And Patrick Hewitt was great. And Kim
Sure.
Dickens was fantastic as the lead investigator. So
Nice.
everyone was great. Highly recommend it. As a movie obviously has been recommended many a time before.
I know.
And if you were like me and foolishly ignored it, go rectify that, especially if you like thrillers.
True. If you're like me, I need
Right.
to. I'll put it on my watch
Exactly.
list.
It's on
Mhm.
a few things on HBO Max right now.
Yeah.
Megan, I'm so glad we got to talk about this movie.
Always, Seth.
I think we have
Mhm.
tentative plans for what we're doing next. But folks, if you have a movie you'd like us to talk about, let us know.
Yes, please. A
I don't think
director too.
yeah, if you have a director you want us to tackle,
Mhm.
we love doing it that way. But
We've ticked Nolan off our list,
exactly.
so
We'll probably come
that's
back
a
eventually, but there's
big
big
accomplishment
accomplishment.
for being our.
Absolutely.
What would we be if we're not a real film podcast
Exactly.
if we didn't do
This
it?
is
So
where all the listeners come.
yes.
Um, he does seem to be one of the most defended filmmakers in online
Yeah, that's true.
chatter, which I think can detract from people. Like, he's good actually, but I also understand what it's like talking to somebody who's like, fuck everybody else. It's Nolan.
He's got a fan base. Like I
Yeah.
think I fangirl hard for like Jordan Peele, but not like that
Mm.
hard, So we'll see.
Yeah, but Jordan Peele has an easier hit rate so far. He's only from
Yeah,
that room.
I know.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it for now. Take care.
Take care.